Today on Cooking with Marki, I will be showing you how to make pot roast. Now this particular recipe is a recipe that I made for my grandmother on the birthday before she passed. So I decided, you know, every year on her birthday, I will make a pot roast dinner in her honor. So this is a 2-day process. You need to marinate the meat first and then cook it the next day. So right now I'm going to show you the ingredients for the marinade, and tomorrow I will show you the other ingredients. What you will need 3 pounds of boneless chuck roast, and you need to leave some of the fat on the roast so that it can melt into the liquid, and it also helps the meat stay moist when you're basting it. And I've pricked it with a fork all over because I feel like the marinade will penetrate the meat better. I have 7 cloves of garlic. Now you can use more garlic, you can use less garlic. It's just up to you. This is kind of just a basic marinade recipe. And I will also smash this. You will need 10 black peppercorns and half a teaspoon of salt. You will need 2 bay leaves, a couple sprigs of thyme, as I lose one, a couple sprigs of thyme, and a small handful of parsley, half of a red onion thinly sliced, or you can use a white onion or yellow onion, whatever onion you have on hand, and 2 cups of dry red wine. Here I'm using a Cabernet Sauvignon. You can use a Merlot, you can use a Shiraz, you can use a Pinot Noir, whatever wine family you prefer, use that wine. Just make sure that it's dry. So these are the ingredients for the marinade. Let's get started. So in this pot I'm just going to combine all of my marinade ingredients. And I'm going to hold off on putting in the salt. Now I'm going to add in the red wine. Okay, and I'm going to turn, alright, I'm going to turn my heat to medium, and I'm going to let this simmer for about 5 minutes. Or I'm going to let it come to a slow simmer. I'm going to simmer it for 5 minutes. Alright, so my marinade has been boiling, or has been on medium for 5 minutes. So now I'm going to add in the salt. I'm going to stir it around. Now I will let this cool before I put this over the meat. Okay, so I've put the roast in a Ziploc bag, and below it I've put it into a glass dish. So now I'm just going to pour the cooled marinade over the meat with the onions and all the extras that we put in there. So I'm going to close it. I'm going to squish out most of the air. Okay, so now I'm just going to let this marinate in the refrigerator overnight, so probably about 18 hours, something like that. And I'm going to turn it occasionally so that the marinade is evenly distributed. Alright everyone, so today is day 2. So my meat has been marinating in the refrigerator for 18 hours, and I turned it ever so often to make sure that the meat is evenly coated with the marinade. So in this container I have a second batch of the marinade. I threw out the marinade that I had the meat in, and so, you know, like I said, I made the exact same recipe just to have a fresh batch, and that I kept in the refrigerator overnight as well. But the only difference is that instead of smashing the garlic cloves, I chopped them, so that's the only difference. Alright, so I've also patted the meat dry, because when you're trying to brown, you don't want moisture to be in the pan, otherwise you're going to be steaming the meat instead of browning the meat. And also I've let the meat come to room temperature, because the same principle, you don't want to put cold meat into a hot pan, otherwise it steams the meat. And we want some good browning on this meat. So let me get into the other ingredients. Alright, so the other ingredients that you will need about 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. mixed in with some dried herbs. And here I have dried rosemary, dried thyme, and dried sage. And this I'm going to, and with this, I'm going to rub onto the meat before I brown it. You will need 5 cups of beef broth or beef stock. You will need oil to brown your meat in. Here I'm just using canola oil, but you can use vegetable, olive oil, whatever oil you have on hand. Here I have about a cup of carrots, and I've sliced them on a diagonal, and they're nice and chunky. I don't like really small pieces of vegetable in my pot roast. I like to be able to see the vegetables and, you know, really feel like there's some substance. So I have thick pieces of carrots chopped on a diagonal. Here I have 1 onion just sliced. I have 1 turnip rough chopped. I have about a cup and a half of mushrooms, cremini mushrooms, and I've quartered them. And these I'm going to saute in a little bit of butter before I add them into the roast. Here I have 2 celery ribs, and I just sliced them. And 9 cloves of garlic, and I just peeled them, and I'm going to leave them whole. I'm going to throw them in when I put the meat on the stove, because, you know, garlic, when it's raw, it's really harsh, but when you cook it for a long time, it becomes sweet and it mellows out, and it's so delicious, and it just kind of just melts into whatever you're cooking it with. So, is there anything else? Oh, you also need 2 teaspoons of sugar. And is there anything else I'm forgetting? I feel like I'm forgetting something, which means I will add it in if I did. Alright, so these are the rest of the ingredients. So let's roll up your sleeves and let's get started. Okay, so here's my meat. So I'm just going to take my mixture of salt and dried herbs, and I'm going to sprinkle it. Now you don't have to use the whole 2 teaspoons, just as long as you get it coated with the salt. And I'm just going to kind of rub that with my hands. And I'm going to repeat this on all sides. Alright, so now I'm going to go wash my hands. Okay, so in this pot I've added some oil. I'd say I added about 3 tablespoons. Or enough to cover the bottom. And my heat is on medium-high. And I'm just going to wait for my meat to get a little hot. When you see the little ripples, that means that it's ready. So now I'm going to put in my meat. It'd also be a good thing to turn your fan on and open some windows, because you don't want the smoke alarm to go off. So I'm going to brown this on each side for about 3 to 4 minutes. A way to know when it's time to turn your meat, if your meat just easily picks up like that when you're browning it, then you know it's ready to turn. However, if your meat has a little stickiness to it, or it's sticking to the pan, then it's not ready to turn. So I'm going to drain off some of this excess fat, and then I'm going to add in my beef broth and the marinade mixture. I'm going to turn my heat back on to about medium-high, and I'm going to stir in the beef broth. We'll pour in the beef broth. Alright, now I'm going to pour in the red wine, along with the onions and all the other spices. And then I'm going to bring this to a boil. And I'm also going to scrape up any brown bits on the bottom. Like I said, I'm going to bring this to a boil, and I'm going to cook this for about 4 hours, or until your meat is tender. And I'm going to turn it about every 30 minutes. And baste it as I turn it. Alright, so my liquid has come to a boil. I've also added in the pieces of garlic. So as I said, just leave them whole. And you will also need to fish out the bay leaves and the thyme stem and the parsley pieces before you serve. But I'm going to now put a lid on. I'm going to turn my heat to medium-low. It's closer to low, so medium-low-low. I'm gonna set my timer to 30 minutes, and in 30 minutes I will show you guys how to baste the meat and to turn it, although I'm pretty sure you might already know how to do that, but just in case you do not, I will show you. Alright, so it has been 30 minutes. So now I'm just going to take a spoon and I'm just going to spoon some of that liquid over the meat. And this just helps the meat stay moist, especially the top, because the top can dry out a little. Alright, so now I'm going to turn it. I'm going to do a little more basting. I'm going to put the lid back on. I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes and I will repeat this process for 4 hours. And during the last hour, so after 3 hours, I will then add in the rest of the vegetables. So there is, whoa, there is about an hour left. So now I'm going to put this over here. Alright, so there is about an hour left. I'm going to turn the meat. I'm going to baste it. And now I'm going to add in all of the rest of my vegetables. And I think I'm just going to put 1 teaspoon of sugar in. So let me get all this submerged into the liquid. Alright, so now I'm going to let this cook for an additional 1 hour. In this skillet, my heat is on medium-high and I've added 2 tablespoons of butter along with 1 tablespoon of olive oil. And I added the olive oil in because it helps prevent the butter from burning. So now I'm going to add in the mushrooms. And I'm going to saute these for about 5 minutes. My mushrooms have developed a little bit of color. So now I'm going to remove these from the pan and I'm going to set these aside until I'm ready to put them into the roast, or the pot with the roast. Alright, so it has been an additional hour and my carrots are tender. So I'm going to add in the mushrooms. Stir that in. I'm actually going to take all of the vegetables out and I'm going to reduce the liquid. So I'm also going to take out the meat as well, and I'm going to keep this warm in a 170-degree oven as well as the vegetables, and then I will slice up the meat and I will show you what everything looks like when you place it onto the table. I've removed the meat and the vegetables from the cooking liquid, so now I've turned my heat up to medium-high and I'm going to boil this for about 10 to 15 minutes or until it's slightly thickened. It's also good to skim off some of the fat. My liquid has reduced by half. I cooked it for 10 minutes. So now I'm just going to plate everything. I'd like to thank you for watching Cooking with Marki. I hope that you try this pot roast recipe because I know that when I made it for my Nana, she really enjoyed it. So, until next time, bon appetit!